Good morning, how are you?
How are you?
Doing well.
So you probably didn't recognize me, but I saw you at the very end of the marathon and smiled, but my hair was in a ponytail, glasses off, so that looked very different. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I saw Shannon. I was asking her, so I was like, Shannon.
Oh, okay. Out of contact, Sarah. And I was just like walking by. Yeah, exciting. Nice to see you. I was running. Yeah. Oh yeah, I was like very exhausted.
Your person.
Yeah, who were you there?
So I was there to see my brother-in-law and my cultural.
Oh, exciting! Yeah. I was very excited that I finished. I didn't walk, so.
Yeah, no, I'm inspired to do it myself. Patrick, good to see you, my friends. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good
Not necessarily here where. Not yet.
So what do you do? Good morning, everyone. So just for conveniences of folks feel a little settled, isn't everyone found the bathrooms and know where they are at least? Okay. For those who have not, we go right up this door, you make a right, follow the hall all the way around. The restrooms are right there. As best I remember. Is that correct? So I want to say thank you so much for signing up for this workshop. Quite honestly, had you not signed up, I wouldn't be here. So I appreciate you doing that. And I also appreciate you being willing to invest in your organization. So I'm going to make sure that my phone is off. You feel free to keep your phone on, especially if you are tweeting about the workshop. There's no shame in my game. I think that's what the kids say. So I'll make sure to turn my phone off until let's do. All right, good. So, a little bit about me, and I want to find out a lot about you. So, we will do some sharing and whatnot. My name is Andre Cohen, and I am an independent consultant. I've been doing leadership development for the majority of my life, starting in high school and finding a career in organizational leadership and whatnot. My undergrad is in organizational leadership. My master's is in educational technology from St. Thomas. Been in Twin Cities for a while. I was the affirmative action officer for Anoka County for 7 years. I taught. My school was right at Fairview University at Skills for Tomorrow, which is now the annex for the YMCA. And I love that building. Those were great times. Ironically, I was at over on Wright Street at a hobby store. So I like flying those quadcopters, those little drone kind of things, and I keep crashing it, so I have to go get parts. And I walk into the store, and this lady like stops me, like she like blocks my entrance to the store, and I'm like, whoa, this is a lot, right? And she says, I know you, and I said, I'm drawing a blank, I'm like. So, so we start going down the association that we may be encountering. And she looks at me again and she says, ah, Andre Cohen! And I'm like, okay, right? And then the people in the store like stop. They're like freaked out by this because I'm freaked out. And she says, it's Amber! And I'm like, Amber. And then I zoned in to like this part of her face, and I was like, "It's you, it's Amber! Oh my God!" So we had this big moment, and she was one of my high school kids that I really didn't know if she was going to make it, and I was really pleased to know that not only did she make it, but she's living a life that's productive. She has children of her own. She is happily married and most importantly, employed. So it's important that you never know or recognize what kind of impact you have on people's lives. And so I'm grateful for my opportunity to teach. And so when I left the county, I did a program called Shannon at the Wilder Foundation. Has anyone participated in that program? If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. It will encourage you to quit your job. No, it's really leadership development and empowerment of individuals. And I was so empowered that I didn't feel like I needed county any longer. So, but it's a really great program, and it's really taught me some wonderful skills. So if you ever get a chance to do that program, it's a year-long program, and they meet once a month at different locations in the Twin Cities. That is the program. So enough about that. I like to kind of know who's in the room, and so if you could just briefly give your name and your organization, and one thing you hope to get out of this particular session. One thing you hope to get out of this session, your name, your organization, and who started the
Price Mac, Minnesota Reading Corps, Minnesota Math Corps. And what I hope to get out of today's session, I just open-minded, so whatever I can learn will be an asset to me in my career. So,
great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Richardson. I'm a therapist in mental health. And I run
use of an interesting word, equitably, so really, really on that.
Hi everyone, I'm Maya Lumber, and I was also, and I enjoyed learning more about equity also, and not just having to speak.
Hi, I'm Isha. Hi everyone. I'm with the Association for Non-Smokers Minnesota, and I'm here to just learn more about being mindfulness and workplace and understanding how to Hi, my name is Karen Hassan. I work for the Nature Conservancy, and I'm also here to keep an open mind and try to continue about
And I'm Louise Morgan, and I'm also with the Nature Conservancy. And I attended the cultural competency class that we did in July. And something happened for me in that session where all of the diversity work that I've been trying to do for a number of years suddenly shifted from an intellectual exercise or an intellectual understanding to more of a core understanding, at a much deeper level. And I just was really excited and pumped by that, and it's really made a difference in the work that I've been doing since then, so I'm back for more of that.
Well, good, I appreciate it, thank you. Good.
Allison Gradesky, I'm the Director of HR at the Children's Museum, and respect is called out in our serve value, and I'm just always looking for ways to lift our values because people are alive for employees, so.
Great. And it's really, real interesting that a number of my students used to volunteer on a regular basis at the Children's Museum. So, yeah.
I'm Kirk Kostopnik, and I work for Portico Health Plan, just down the road in Snow, New Jersey. And I came because we're an organization of about 30 people, and our organization itself is very diverse. And the people that we serve many immigrants due to the problems that they have with health coverage when they come into the country. They're very unaware of our how to navigate the healthcare system when they don't qualify for healthcare, so we're able to help them with that. And so we help people from all over the world, and every day it's a challenge. Everything from people that are on probation that are American to people that are from West Africa or Southeast Asia that have just come to the country. And I really like the idea of respectful workplace because I think that there is a lot of cultural conflict that occurs without something we don't even know that's happening there. So it would be better if we could have a better workplace, more respect.
Actually sitting right up there, and I was able to sit in on your last workshop in July. I love this guy, so now I'm here.
I'm Paul Bloom, I'm the Development Project Manager office here at the Minnesota Nonprofit. And I've been here for about 4 years, and over that time, learned a lot about the nonprofit sector. And one of the things that my eyes have here is people do what they think works. And I have seen that people do what they think works, but it doesn't work. And particularly when it does come to showing cultural competence in the workplace, particularly in the fundraising field. And so I would like to apply what I learned here to how a better working nonprofit sector, personally better working others.
My name is Kristen Lane, I work for Valley Outreach in Stillwater, and we're a nonprofit that makes people. And it's in Stillwater, and it's also known as Stillwater. But it's a faith-based community, and I want to help create a safer, more inclusive environment.
I'm also very open-minded, but I'm looking for the education that can bring back to our education.
Hi, Ray Ross, also from Minnesota University in Minnesota. And I think that, well, one, We were at your, the other one in July, in the workshop, and trying to hear about this one, but then also just about the regretful women is kind of one of our kind of goals, trying to take on those issues. So just open to what's happening.
Hi, so I'm Megan Robinson, also with Minnesota Reading Corps and Minnesota Math Corps. Very similar to what these ladies said, we were here in the summertime, and I just loved the session and I'm excited to be here again. But really, again, looking for tools and things that we can bring back to our organization. I'm Kat Sample from Minnesota Council of Churches, and I do human resources there, so we have diverse staff, diverse clientele who look at the SIEs also. So really just help with the staff.
I'm Chet Cheddar with Street Fires, which is Friendship and Development Disabilities and also the Travel Program. And although my summer staff is very diverse, our year-round staff really is not, but we're constantly crashing into each other. So I'd like to learn some tools to help us with that.
No, it's funny as we're all talking. I guess I've been pollinating quite a bit. So like most of your areas of expertise have kind of had some interactions with at some point. So I'm really excited to be all to be here. So some of the stuff that I'd like for us to consider we'll be looking at both some mental models. We'll look at some respect barriers, and then I want to also talk about what respect is and what it's not. And then how is it that as organizations we actually foster atmospheres of respect. And so we'll start with your handout. And for folks who were in the session in July, I just want to remind you, I'm the same person. So some of my information, at least in this beginning part, may seem redundant, but I hope that you are able to find some new lessons in that. So I want to talk about some of the basic truths of human beings, right? So when we start talking about this idea of respect, I want us to be clear about what we're kind of talking about. So first of all, some of the motivations of human beings we're not as complex as we like to think that we are. And so I'd like to offer some ways to think about how people, want to be treated and how motivation kind of happens in our organization. So first, human beings can learn, change, and grow. And I'm very appreciative of that because when I was 17, I was a mess. So I'm glad that I'm less or a different mess now, right? So we can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works, and you said it very eloquently, even when what? Even when it doesn't work. But our core question should be, why are they doing that if it's not effective? And what's the answer to that? Particularly those of you who are here in July. What's the answer to that? Why do people do things that aren't beneficial, don't work, but they continue to do them? It's all they know, all right? They're change adverse, right? So they don't want change. Why else? It feels familiar.
Do something different, it'll be even worse.
They feel that if they do something different, it'll be even worse.
They tend to like sometimes maybe it does work, and so they're making that a bigger deal.
Okay, so sometimes maybe it does work. Okay, so I want to bring it right here to Minnesota. I want to bring it home, right? Adrian Peterson. Is everyone familiar with Adrian Peterson? Adrian Peterson got in trouble for behavior off the football field. And what was the behavior that caused him trouble off the field? Abusing his child, right? Some people might say spanking. In the vernacular of of the culture from which he comes, it would have been a whooping. I'm not sure how you spell that, but that's, he whooped his kid, right? Did Adrian Peterson have a defense for that action? Did he have a reason? Did he have an explanation as to why he would abuse his child or spank his child or whoop his child in the way that he did? Because it was discipline? And yes, ma'am.
Didn't he say that's what his dad did?
He said that's what was done to him. When? When was that done to Adrian Peterson?
When he was a child.
When he was a child, right? So when we look at this thing, why do people do what they think works even when it doesn't work? They do it because it worked in the past. But what's the problem? What's that?
Or they think it.
Or they think that it worked in the past, right?
Argue.
Well, and you can, I'm just saying what Adrian said,
Yeah.
right? So that's what he said, right? So what changed between when Adrian was a child and today? Everything, right? Context changed. And what oftentimes happens is when people do what they think works, what they haven't taken into account is that the context is different than when I did it last. Right? And so we have to keep reminding people that the context is different. When I worked at Anoka County, there's the old building and the new building. And the old building looked like the Brady Bunch, right? So 60s kind of paneling, and they built the building in the 80s, so they said something. But it had, 60s wood paneling and extra core and all this kind of stuff. And they tell me they used to smoke cigars in the kickback, big old stogies, right? If I try to light up a cigar now in a county building, what's going to happen to me? Right? Why? Context has changed. Right? And so one of the things that we have to help people understand is that sometimes we run into conflicts, we run into misunderstandings because people haven't understood it. They either don't understand the context or they don't understand that the context has changed. Right? Next is that all human behavior is goal-directed. I believe that there's true altruism, that people do stuff just because it's a good thing to do. I think that's very rare. I think most folks do things because they see some kind of benefit for themselves, whether it is, something that is concrete or something that is kind of ethereal, something kind of emotional, but we do things because there's some kind of benefit to us. Which means that if we see a behavior we don't understand, what do we have to ask? Yeah, well, what's the goal of this particular behavior, right? What's the goal of this particular behavior? And lastly, an attitude is a reaction to a goal. An attitude is a reaction to a goal. Oftentimes, we think that an attitude is a thing, when in fact, it is not a thing. It's smoke when we should be looking for the fire. Right? So what have you been taught about an attitude? That attitudes should be positive, or they can be positive, or they should be positive. Right? What else have you been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? It's a perception.
It's an emotional presentation.
It's an emotional presentation. It's an approach. Attitude. It's feelings. You guys are great thinkers. Great thinkers. And when my parents talked about attitudes, those are probably the things that they meant. All the things that you said. Right? But it was something about us. So my parents went to a place called the Old School. And they would tell us that all the time. You know, I'm from old school. So one day I said, Dad, where's your diploma? I'm from old school. He was like, boy. So for the first 7 years of my life, I thought my name was Boy. Boy, get over here. Boy, sit down. Boy. So my parents went to college and they wanted to raise us differently than how their parents raised them, right? Because apparently whoopings were common as a part of that raising. So my parents being more sophisticated than my grandparents wanted to raise us appropriately. And so they use a lot of psychological stuff, which I'm still working through now, right? So my parents decided to, you know, they would have us do things like stand in the corner if we were naughty, or, you know, hold dictionaries, you know, or look up the words that we said that were bad and write them 500 times so that now we can memorize those words. Just counterproductive. Anyway, so my parents would do all this stuff, but then when they would get at their wits' end and all that psychology stuff would go out the window, they would go back to what they knew, which was yelling and screaming. And so my parents would start saying these unintelligible things, right? Things that don't even make sense. Like my mother said, you know, something about the air conditioning, and she was like, if you close that door with the air conditioning on, you're gonna wake up dead. I'm like, how does that work? Right? But they would say these unintelligible things or things that didn't make sense, and they would just get frustrated, and they would say things like, boy, I don't like your attitude. You better fix your face. And so I would go, you know, making all these gestures, and they didn't think that was funny, and so they would send me to my room, right? Or my mother, she just cut straight to it. She said, boy, go to your room till you learn how to act. And I would get my act together while I was in my room. And I'd step out into the hallway, and I'd say, to be or not to be. No, lots of time in my room, I'm telling you, right? Because they didn't think that was funny. But it wasn't until I was 17 that I actually understood what they meant by an attitude. So my dad was my pastor. So growing up, I was the pastor's son. And we would go to church on Sunday from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. So we go to church all day. So Friday night, I asked my dad for the car. My dad loves me. What does he say? He says, yes, he loves me, right? So I get the keys, I'm kicking it, we're cruising for girls. I don't know what would have happened had we found girls, but we're cruising for girls. I come home before curfew, I fill the car up with gas, I give my dad the keys, and what does he say about my attitude? It's a good attitude, right? So Sunday, my best friend Dexter calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sunday?
Church day.
It's church day, right? But I'm 17, I'm invincible, and Jesus is my friend. So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? What does my dad say? Not only does he say no, but he gives me the hell sermon, right? So that in my household, the worst punishment you could get was going to hell. And either you could go to hell on your own, or he would show you the way. After that interaction, I would say my dad had what kind of an attitude? Intolerant, angry, righteous, bad attitude. And what would my dad say about my attitude? Equally bad, right? Well, probably worse, right? Yeah. So on Friday, we're cool, we're good. On Sunday, we have a problem. What determines an attitude? Expectations. Context.
Goal.
In this case, it was God.
The
Okay.
goal, I guess, for God.
What's
The goal was Sunday, when where she got.
Uh-huh.
Disrupted that.
Uh-huh. Anyone have a teenager in your life?
I have a preteen.
Okay. Okay,
I
preteen.
can just relate to everything.
Yep. Yep. So, or I guess the new category is tween.
Yeah, he's corrected me.
Is that what he says? He corrects you. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So, a tween is like is it preteen?
And gender-based too.
Okay. So it's gender based. Okay. So he is a.
I think tweens are for girls, I think. But
Okay.
there's a different word for preteens are for boys.
Wow. I didn't know that. Okay. Well,
I heard you have a daughter, so
yes.
tweens is the word.
Yeah, I got a long way before that happens. We have to have that conversation. Although she was dancing to some Nicki Minaj, I was like, oh no. Something like this. She was striking it, breaking a leg, and Nene, and I don't even know who is Nene. Anyway, so young people in your life, right? And can you remember being that young person and you go up to your parent and, here's the big setup for that, right? So the young person goes and says, oh, kind, and you go, Mom, you look good. Dad, you've been working out, right? How they set up the whole thing. And then they say, can I, right? So can I go to Cindy's party? And it starts in 5 minutes. And you're looking like, what are you talking about, right? You haven't cleaned your room, and stuff is like a mess, and you say, no! And what happens to the kids? Their attitude changes, right? And then later you have a better, you gather your senses because they just irked you, they were on your last nerve, and you say, you know what, better heads will prevail, I will, no, you can go to Cindy's party. I like Cindy's family. Blah blah blah. What happens to the attitude thing? It changes, right? So what determines an attitude? Whether you're getting what you want or not, right? In education, hey, how are you? Good to see you. In educational circles, we would call that a goal. So when someone has a good attitude, if you like pizza here, if there's space there. When you're getting what you want, you have a good attitude. When you're not getting what you want, you have a bad attitude. And so, as a helper, when I see people with bad attitudes, what do I know about them for sure? They're not getting what they want. Right? So that's what I know for sure, that they're not getting what they want. So what is it that they want? Now here's the part where we start talking about this idea of respect. It is my belief that Abraham Maslow was correct. And so there are people familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yep. And so there are, depending on what model you use, there are 5 or 7 hierarchy of needs. And I also like to go back to the source. And so I stumbled upon a man who was Abraham, who was the inspiration in the services of not of ourselves, complement to ourselves. And lastly, this idea of safety, that we need to be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually safe to have relationships in terms of that belonging, and to have relationships that recognize our significance or our purpose. And so Alfred Adler provides those things for us. And so one of the things that I want to start to talk about is this idea of some mental models that we need to deconstruct, particularly if we're talking about making sure that people have access to their safety, significance, and belonging. So right now what I'd like to do before I take another step forward is I'd like for you to write down some of your thoughts about the principles that I just gave you. Right? So those truths about human beings, significance, belonging, and safety. Just want you to write down some thoughts that you had about that. So I'll give you about a minute or so to write down some of your thoughts. Yes.
I've got one.
Yeah, you should. Instead of okay. So you can. I'm going to ask you just to stop right there, and if you could get in groups of 4 and kind of talk about your observations or your thoughts about those mental models that I kind of gave you. I'd like for you to just talk about that for just a couple of minutes, so maybe 3 minutes or so, 4 minutes. Yes, you can have a group of 5. Yes, that is allowed.
I think what's hard is that I didn't necessarily ask her like what her goal was. And looking back, I sort of wish I did ask her that question. But then I'm always wondering, does she even know what her goal is? I'm trying to get at this behavior that she shows when I ask her what her goal is.
Exactly.
She absolutely might try to do. Yeah. Or even like helping or asking somebody like their priority. Usually people have more than one.
Yeah, even in that case, I think when people are starving and they don't expect concentration, like you're talking about, they would be you can not have a day. If you have a choice to eat or play an instrument, they would choose play an instrument. So the physiological effort, it would still change that thing that gave them meaning rather than something that gave them, safety or physiological. So I really think that those are motivated themselves that you're gone. Everybody in the class is sometimes motivated by that. But I think, yeah, again, sometimes people don't know what that is.
Yes.
And that's valuable because people know that. And expect that everybody that wants that. And then when it's continuing along, it's just after you die, it's just you can feel like and I was thinking
Four, three, two, one.
Very low.
Come back. Were there, as you were having your conversations or even your private thoughts, were there some themes that you started to notice or things that came up as it relates to how these things really feed into this idea of respect in the workplace? What were some of those ideas or parts of your conversation that Okay, so generational differences and how that affects things in the workplace, relationships in the workplace. Yes, sir.
Get along so well that it's not so sometimes you feel bad. Where do you draw?
Yeah, so where do you draw a happy medium between being overly social in the workplace versus actually getting something done, right? And when we talk about some of these mental models, I think I'll be able to really draw some clear lines on what that balance is or what that balance should look like. Other folks, any challenges with the theories that I presented to you or the ways of thinking about respect in the workplace that I offered it as a part of that introduction? Yes.
I just want to know, but I felt like we were talking more of an introspection than looking at this problem with this, problem with that. So it's more like maybe I'm looking at it this way. There's more of a lot of actually. So I don't know if people felt that.
Yeah, so you felt that it was more introspective, so you were looking at yourself more so than you were
So the
looking
work
at.
itself was like, it's almost like it's down for
How do you get into someone else's motivation? You ask them, right? So to be able to ask them, I also must be able to analyze and ask myself, what are my motivations? So that there was a time, so I never saw Barack Obama coming. Like he was like he stood up on me like bam. I was like, whoa, my president! Ah! Right, so because when in the '80s I was like, there'll never be a black president. I was like, I'll die, all this kind of stuff. And here he is, and I'm like, wow. But my objective was to blow the White House up. Let's paint the White House black, right? That was my thing. Until I was able to become a bit more introspective and say, look, I got a role to play in this. I don't have to be it. I don't have to be the change. I just have to participate as the change is going forward. So,
You found that like why if your parents were positive so positive about as a pastor, why did you have that attitude when you were going
oh well, so I only told you part.
You said you were a mess, but
yeah. So my life is a bit more complicated than the short tidbit that I gave you. So my father was a Black Panther. And so when he had his religious conversion, those two things or actually those three things, being college educated, being a revolutionary, and then having this religious experience, those three things became the bastion by which I was kind of birthed out of. And so, and the 80s it was two sides in the 80s, particularly in the urban Black community. You were either NWA or Public Enemy. And NWA stood for something. It wasn't like an airline. So NWA or Public Enemy, and Public Enemy was very progressively radical for rapping about political stuff. NWA was about gangsters and hoes. I don't know. That was but at any rate, so cool. Thank you so much for indulging me in that. So in your handout, there's also a circle, and let's call this the circle of all human knowledge. All human knowledge is contained in this circle. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to cut yourself a slice of the circle of the size of what you know of everything there is to know. Cut yourself a slice of what you know of everything there is to know. And I know that your pen can't do justice, right? So this is an exercise. So so what is contained in that sliver, that slice, that line, or that dot of what you know of all that there is to know? What are the things that you know for sure? Yes.
I know spiritual
You know spirituality. Great. Two more things. You know for sure.
Everything changes.
Everything changes. So you know spirituality. You know that everything changes. Just one more. You know for sure that the world is round, right? So you know that the world is round. You know spirituality. You know that things change, right? So now what I'd like you to do is I want you to cut yourself a piece of pie the size of what you know you do not know. Now, I will tell you that it is quantifiable, so you can quantify it. So it's not the whole circle, but I want you to quantify it because there is a third part of the circle that will also reduce. All right? So I want you to cut yourself the second piece of pie, which is the size of what you know you do not know. The second one is what you know you don't know. For example, yep. So I know that I do not know Mandarin Chinese. I know that I don't know how to fly an airplane, and I also know that you don't want me as your heart surgeon. So what are some of the things that are contained in that piece of the pie? What are some things that you know that you don't know? Things that you're aware of that you don't have access to. You can't even Google it. Or if you Google it, it's because you don't know. Right. What are some things that you know you don't know?
Dark matter.
Dark matter. Please raise your hand if you also know that you don't know or understand dark matter. All right, cool. Calculus. Please raise your hand if calculus is a challenge for you. All right. One more. Cooking. Right. So it doesn't include does microwaves counted as cooking? Okay. So anything outside of a microwave, chip and cook. Raise your hand if that's a challenge for you. All right. All right. Good. Well, we got a lot of good cooks. Next time we'll have a potluck. Hopefully there'll be some luck in the pot, but there'll be some other stuff. Anyway, so we have what we know, we have what we know we don't know, and so what do you think is the third piece of the pie? What you don't know, or blind spot. So if you can write the word blind spot in the rest of that. So when we talk about this idea of, and we'll consider this circle your paradigm, Paradigm. I used to say paradigm because I was hooked on phonics. It works for me. Anyway, so that is your paradigm. Now, whose primary responsibility was it to introduce you to a paradigm? Your parents. And where did your parents get their paradigm? From their parents. And where did their parents get their? From their. Now, have you ever received a copy of a copy of a copy? By the time you get to the 5th or 6th generation of that copy, it doesn't look quite like the original, does it? Go ahead. And not if it's being edited every time, right? So if it's being edited every time, is it the same document? No, right? And it's interesting because that's a great way to think about this. As this paradigm has been passed down to you, I'm sure your parents added some stuff that your grandparents didn't have, right? And I bet your grandparents added things that your great-grandparents didn't have, because what's changing the whole time? The context has changed. Everything has changed. And so these paradigms, these truths that we're getting about ourselves are actually what? Made up. These things are made up. One of my favorite stories, and you probably heard this story, 3 generations of women in the kitchen, cooking a holiday meal, and let's say that the meat is turkey. And so the mother's in there hacking this thing in half, and the daughter comes in and says, "Mom, what are you doing?" She says, "I'm cutting the turkey in half." And she's like, why? And the mom makes up some lame reason and frustrates the mother. The daughter frustrates the mother, and the mother says, well, go ask your grandmother why I'm doing it. And so the daughter goes to the grandmother and says, grandmother, why? Mom told me to ask you why she's cutting the turkey in half. She says, she's cutting the turkey in half. She's like, yes, ma'am, she is cutting the turkey in half. She's like, oh, Lord. And the daughter is like, well, Mom, why, or Grandma, why is she cutting the turkey in half? And the grandmother says, because I cut the turkey in half. Now the daughter's really dumbfounded as to why the grandmother is doing it, and now the mother is doing it. And she says, Grandma, why did you cut it in half? And the grandmother says, that's the only way it would fit in the oven. So now the mother is carrying out this pattern that she observed, and the context is different. Right? And so our paradigms, how we see the world, what we know we don't know, and our blind spots, most often, particularly when we talk about this idea of respect, we've gotten that from our familial units. Now, this is the thing I think is very interesting. So I work at the Adler Graduate School down in Richfield, and one of the things that I teach in my multicultural counseling class is talking about this idea of respect, talking about what you get from your parents and all this kind of stuff, and we talk about families. And most people say that their families are dysfunctional. Anybody ever heard somebody say that? That my family is dysfunctional, their family is somebody. So, why does that become the only place, oftentimes, that we get our paradigm when we know that some of the people in our family may be that dysfunctional? But that's a rhetorical question. Don't answer that. So this paradigm is your operating system on how you see the world. And then it gets solidified by these mental models. Right? So one of the things that I want to do is deconstruct some of these mental models, and I want to have conversations with you as we try to deconstruct these mental models. The first mental model that we must deconstruct if we want to have respect in the workplace is this idea that diversity has a direct ratio to low standards. That because we have diversity, we have to lower our standards. Now, this might not show up in most of your work, but particularly in academia, this is a discussion that sometimes people try to have, and this is a false flag. There is no ratio between these two things. Because what is diversity, first of all? What is diversity? How do we talk about diversity? It's difference. It's inclusion. It's people's experiences and perspectives as it relates to difference. So the way that I like to talk about this idea of diversity is the metaphor, or we can even use that in allegory, if you will, that before I want to make a cake, what must I have? The ingredients. And for my organization, the ingredients, the recipe, if you will, is the missions and goals of that organization. Okay? So the recipe is the mission and goals of the organization. Diversity then becomes an ingredient for my recipe. So anyone made a cake? Right? So what kinds of things do you need to make a cake? You need flour, eggs, butter, milk, sugar.
Quantity-wise, the sugar is very like 40% to 50% of the dry weight comes from sugar alone.
Okay, so sugar alone is the majority of that, right? So now, when you get those things, do you lay them out first, or do you just kind of lump them all together? Or shells, carton? How do you do that? So there are steps to follow. So some parts go with other parts, right? So before you even start mixing that stuff out, I was taught to lay out all of your stuff to make sure that you have everything that you need to what? Make a cake, right? Now, having all the ingredients set out on the table or the counter, is that the cake? No. Guess what that is? Diversity. Knowing what you have, knowing what the differences are, how much quantity, all that stuff, that is, in fact, diversity. But it is not the cake. So when we talk about this idea of diversity, all we're talking about is differences. Now, when we start adding value to what those differences are, that's when the misnomer, when the little crack comes into our consciousness that tells us that diversity equals low standards. This is a value judgment. This is a thing. This is a noun. But this is a value judgment. And those things don't go together. Right? So you don't have to have low standards to have diversity. You may have to have different standards, because the standards that were set were designed for what you got. So if you want to do something different, you have to have some different things. You have to do things different. The other thing is that this idea of, particularly in the workplace, and this is where we mess up in terms of respect for the workplace. Have you ever heard a manager or team leader say, "We're a family"? Have you ever heard somebody say that?
Walmart says that all the time.
Walmart says that all the time.
Or car salesman.
Or a car salesman. We're a family. Interesting. In terms of, so deconstructing this mental model, how does one gain membership to a family? There's typically 3 ways that people gain membership to a family. What are those ways?
You are born into the family.
So you are born into the family, you are adopted into a family. Okay, so you're married into a family. And I'll give a fourth. You're also grafted into a family, right? So you make up a network of people that you call you graft them together and say, "This is my family," right? Work teams. How do you belong to a work team? You have a task, you're hired, you have a contract. And what happens if you or the employer breaches that contract?
You leave the team.
You leave the team, you're done. Peace, I'm out. What happens if you breach the contract of your family? What's that? You're stuck like Chuck. I don't know who Chuck is, but he's stuck. Right? In terms of family, what are the responsibilities associated with family? What must you do to maintain your membership? Conform, okay.
You have to live in order to maintain it.
You have to be alive to maintain that. But I got some family members who are dead, and they're still a part of my family. In work teams, what do you have to do to maintain your membership? You got to do your job. You have to work towards the goal of the organization. When your goal is different than the goal of the organization, you need to quit. Or start another organization, right? So family expectations. Threshold is relatively low, right? If you don't follow through on that, the consequences are very, very minimal. I mean, in terms of you can be cut off, and that might have some psychological ramifications and that kind of stuff. But in a work team, if you don't perform, you're out of there. Now, here's the real trick. Is that this is very much goal-oriented, and this is very much relational, right? So family is very much, the focus is about relations in order to spread our genes and our means and all that stuff, where team is about the mission and goal of the organization. Now, this is where the trick happens. When you have, okay, so when I was at the county, I knew when performance reviews were coming. Because I was the affirmative action officer, but I was also the coordinator for disabilities and that kind of stuff. So I focused on that. So I would start getting people reporting to me about how they were being discriminated against on their job by their supervisor before review time. Now this was an anomaly because it'd be like no complaints, no nothing. But right before review time starts coming out, people are saying I'm being harassed, I'm being subjugated, I'm negative, all this kind of stuff. They start giving these reports. Why is that? Because they got away with something? Yes, sir.
Not going to get other goals or
yeah, right. You said what? They're looking for protection. Why? Because they're not performing. So they start throwing up this dust. Look at this dust, and don't look at my performance. So what we typically have is when we have people who are talking about this family stuff, particularly as individuals, just do this because my boy. It's just, I'm gonna come in late, so you cover me for this because I got you. You are my boy, right? So underperformers start trying to treat the workplace like family because they can't perform the tasks.
Well, Andre, in those situations, you kind of gave examples. Do you think that sometimes people came to you because they were about to be judged and they were scared, so here's their time to say, I'm about to be on the spotlight? But there are some issues that I want to make sure that are addressed before you judge me.
Yes. No, I get that.
Okay.
And there certainly were cases like that, but there were some pretty habitual people who would show up right before their eval, and they're like, Andre, you know how he is. Blah, blah, blah. No, I don't, because I understood the first time, but like this is the third time. Why? That kind of stuff. So no, I think there are people who have legitimate concerns who want to put that stuff out in front. But I also saw the pattern was more often that these were underperformers who already knew they were underperforming, knew that the sting was coming, and wanted to set up this distraction so that we could not have to focus on their performance, because they either could not or would not be able to adapt to what's being asked of them. So this family versus team thing, I think, is something that needs to be addressed, because it sets up a false reality. We start relying more on relationships than we actually count on doing anything. Idea of is discretionary effort, and basically what I would say is, if I'm being inundated with negative comments, with negative thoughts, being left out, being not, obviously not included, being talked about, even as a perception, am I going to be able to give my 100% best in my job? Probably not, right? There are demonstrations that people have done where they have people stick out their arms and they say positive words to them, and they're able to keep their arms up. But other experiments where people put their arms up and the same people who say negative things to them, and they can't keep their arms up. I don't do magic tricks like that, but I've seen those done, and psychologically I can understand how these micro inequities or these microaggressions can actually decrease workplace effectiveness. Because if somebody, particularly if it was a supervisor, here's an example. I was introduced to someone. This is a micro inequity. I was introduced to someone, and they said, you really got to meet Andre. He gives diversity training from the black perspective. He's really good at that. And I just kind of laughed because I don't get it from the black perspective. Have you guys gotten the black perspective yet? Right? I give it from a human perspective, but I just happen to be black. Right? There's nothing I can do about that. Right? So it's not the black perspective of a dude who happens to be black. Right? And so part of, I could get really upset about that and chew on that and let that lower my self-esteem, but I don't, I'm not that cat. But discretionary effort and micro-inequities are definitely related. So if you have, one of the things that I do in my personal coaching with problem employees is I ask them about their environment. One of the questions that I ask, which is carrying in the mind for me, is what is your workplace's policy on cursing? Using bad words, right? Right? So in organizations that don't allow it at all, have a zero tolerance, discretionary effort, people's willingness to work there is way high compared to folks who don't have it or have kind of a laissez-faire approach to that, because that becomes the creeping disrespect in the workplace. If you can't respect a place well enough to control what you say in the honor of your work or the people that you're working with, then I question your motives, right? So there's that. And then there's this idea of equality and equity. And many of you know this concept as well as I do, or even better than I do. What is the difference, or how do those things show up? What's the difference between equality and equity? Okay, so giving some people what they need as opposed to giving them the same thing. Other folks. Are the word pictures or examples that you've heard?
Yeah, the one with the two kids.
Okay.
Where they have something like boxes to start with.
And each kid is tall or shorter than the other?
The older is taller, so he just about looks over the wall. As we can see the plate of the heel, the gate. The second one is just about the heel of the wall. The third one has the same size box as the other two, but can't see at all.
Okay.
So then we give them a bigger box. And the older one can see even better. The second one can see a little bit better. The third one can get anywhere to. So the second one gives the children's one a box that can be as the older second box size one.
The box size. Yep.
From Google.
Yeah. And as I said, there's tons of those demonstrations of different models. Another one is that equality is being everyone choose, equity is being everyone choose.
All right. So giving everyone choose that. So okay, so that's fancy, right? So all those are great mental models. How do those things play out in the workplace? Like, so how do you give someone equity when 1964 says give them equality? When I say 1964, do you know what I'm talking about? Civil Rights Act, 1964, right? So how does that show up? Or what is a strategy that has been used in your organization to help this equity thing show up? So having it for the least, even though it affects everyone. Other folks, how does that show up in your work? hard to execute how you do that. So one way, and I gave that to you earlier around this idea of attitude. What's one way to start getting this equity? So how do I do that? Say it. Ask them. Right? So for example, secretary comes late. Comes late every day. I just reprimand her. But the rules say you get here at such and such time. When I run into those cases in my practice, I ask this question of the supervisor who wants me to work with this client. Is this a time for them to grow, or is it a time for them to go? Have you hired me to help you usher them out of the organization, or actually help them develop in the organization? Because if you want to develop them, then we need to find out why they're doing what they're doing. Because they have a good reason. Go ahead.
How do you run out by the agent
Right, take the example.
So, maybe we can finish this and that we can select it, but that person can go.
So I don't make they make those decisions. I don't make those decisions.
Okay.
Right? So they tell me this. No, we really want to grow this person, and that's typically what they say. They never really say we want to fire this person. That's why we hired. But I just want to check, right? Because I don't want to just be used. Or if I want to be used, I want to know what I'm being used for. Which, anyway. So this idea that I need to sit down with the secretary and find out what's going on. Oh, she just lost her car, or her car's been in the shop for 2 weeks, and now, I don't know if you've ever tried to catch the bus someplace and you miss one bus, your whole day is toast, right? So sitting down and finding out what the goals are can help you correct their behavior. And to be quite honest, most people want a job. Most people want to. They want to combine, they want to help the organization, but we have to, oftentimes we rely so much on the rules that we don't take that personal approach to actually find out what is it that this person needs, what size shoes do they need. So if she's coming in, she needs to be there at 9, and I have the flexibility to have her come in at 10, but she's got to stay later, and if she's cool with that, that creates equity.
Also, see our organization. Something that I can start. Yeah. So this is causing problems. Organization. Yeah, that's so we recommend like clear policies. It might seem like a
No, it's not a simple question, and to be quite honest, an attorney would love that situation. Because when
we don't have it.
Yeah. So even in small organizations, if you don't have a standard, then you risk a whole lot of things, right? So yeah, because if you don't have a standard, you risk a lot of behavior. So yes, I would suggest that you guys talk about what are some at least bare minimums, and then you can negotiate those things. You can negotiate, but you need to have a bottom line in terms of procedures and all that. So you're in the right place. So Minnesota, position of non-profit. Yeah, no, invite them.
I can see how, depending on what the job is, so the roles have different responsibilities. So some roles actually have different hours. anyway. It's something just like one for notice. Others. So again, that's the right to do. I wouldn't necessarily do this for that, but they require, right? Yes, fine.
But the problem is, specifically that, federal lab, the fact that some people are looking, and they, so, this is, but I didn't realize that this is how it's going to change.
And to your point, right? So there may obviously be some folks who need to be in front of their computer, or folks who need to be out in the field. Each of those departments, though, has to have a structure, even if it's a flexible structure, but they have to be able to identify and defend any decision that they made in a court of law. So one of the fallback positions in all this respect, right? So this is all touchy-feely stuff. But why are we doing this? We're actually doing this because behind all of this stuff is this law that says that I have to create opportunities for everyone that does not create a desperate impact on somebody else's organization. So this is a fuzzy, this is a Muppet Show, right? But the back office stuff is the legal framework that allows us to even have this conversation. And so this stuff is to help mitigate any legal consequences inappropriate behavior. And so those policies, even if each department has different policies, they have to have those written down as a baseline so that it doesn't become, because this discretionary effort on the part of management can turn into discrimination like that, right? Like that. And if you don't have a policy, you can't defend against that if you don't have a defense. So I would say talk with your folks and really encourage that. Yes, sir.
Question following up from your guidance that we had. I think that's actually really but when you leave it at that, nor there's other kinds of belonging for belonging. And they don't really much that long car might feel for the job even else in the past, but you might stay. And that's the really weird thing. There's a lot of history of HR asking for or not asking to actually looking for solutions. And in workplaces that are trying to build that workplace perspective, I can make sure that the answer feel free to ask.
Yeah. So, So rules plus relationship equals respect. Rules minus relationship equals respect. Right? So one of the things that needs to happen is that people who are supervising folks need to know who they're supervising. Not to this point of this family thing, but you have a relationship focused on goals of the organization that you know this individual. So then you can start asking those questions from a point of trying to make sure that their safety, significance, and belonging is addressed as you try to move towards these goals. Because the other part is, I can tell you that, I lost my car and, catch the bus and all this other stuff, but you still need me here at 9 o'clock. But although I have a need, I've told you this. What now happens? So if we can't negotiate on coming in later or whatever, then what has to happen? What's that? I gotta get here at 10. I gotta find a way to, because you've made it clear that we don't have room for negotiation around it. So I have to figure out a way to make that happen, right? But we have to have that conversation, particularly around that relationship piece, because that's the human aspect, right? So I can go by the policy, but the policy is to advance the organization, not to advance the people in the organization. So, but if I know, look, my hands are tied. You've been late 6 times in the last 2 weeks. My hands, we've talked about this. We've gone over some scenarios. And it doesn't look like you're gonna be able to make this work. What are we gonna do now? So having those kinds of conversations, I think, are really important. So that equity is. So I want to. Is that helpful? I love this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing with each other things that you thought were helpful. I'm going to go to this perspective. You know what? Can we take a 7-minute break or so? It's a little warm in here, and some biology happening. So let's come back at 10:31. Thank you so much.
I'm just really strong.
Like maybe
Can you grab the keys?
What's that?
And every time
Yeah.
I meet with them,
What's that? Keys over there.
like,
Yeah.
whoever says something, and the person goes, like, remember how to chat. And like during our conversation, it's fun. And they talked to me yesterday that it's like an internal point. I haven't taken the time to build it. So did you meet with the memory?
It's one that would.
So, and like, so she's literacy in and out of office.
I thought you were gonna.
Never in the office. Remember, and then also, really catch up with we just like, I'm really struggling with this. And like that ego.
So
basically the deconstruction is just questioning these models, right? So where's our organization as it relates to these things? How do we do that? And that is the deconstruction process.
I would say the one I most don't understand is the third one.
Which is microequities as it relates to discretionary effort. I'll just, so as an affirmative action officer for Anoka County, I use lots of legal stuff as my background. That's what that was the hammer that I had. This stuff was all pillow, hammer with that stuff. So here's an example. Okay. What is discrimination? So this concept won't make, I have to connect these two because they are related. So what is discrimination? So treating people differently
Based on the assumptions you have about them.
based on an assumption you have about them, about something that can't be, that they can't change or something, right? And what else? There's a sticking point to this.
When the standard is like choose not to or act or have an excuse but it's different from others, simply
Okay, singling that person out,
or your behavior
or their behaviors are different. You're so close. So go ahead and give it to me.
There's a feeling of something's not treated right.
Okay, it's a feeling that somebody's not treated right, prejudice and bias. Okay, so I know where I got to go next, right? So, discrimination is a legal process. Example, walking down the hall, coworker slaps you on the butt. What do? After they pick themselves, after they compose themselves? Right? What's that? Depends on who it is.
Well, that's because like if it's a woman and a woman, they can kiss each other on the cheek.
I'm not talking about kissing on the cheek, and I'm talking about somebody grabbing your butt.
Tell them to knock it off.
You tell them to knock it off. They don't do it. So Tuesday you come in, whop. Wednesday, whop. What? There's a problem, and how do you resolve that problem? You go to HR, right? You go to your administrator. So they start this trail, right? What if you're not getting satisfaction from the organization? You go to an attorney. And what does the attorney do? They take legal action. Because who said that they will resolve this?
Probably the HR department.
Discrimination can only be fixed through legal action. That's how it gets repaired, right? So yeah, I know some of you look at me like, but I've heard of people experiencing the verb of discrimination, right? But we'll talk about what that really was, because it is pertinent to this, right? So discrimination is anything that I can sue over. So someone's grabbing me, someone it's discovered that they've been chucking, a certain group of people who are part of a protected class, their resumes in the trash, or it's discovered that, we look at our stuff and we see that all the managers are middle-aged white guys and nobody else is up in that stuff. It's discovered that we have disparate impact, and we made a policy that impacts a whole group of people negatively to the benefit of another group of people. These are all things that are discrimination that we can sue over. However, there are tons of things that we experience in the workplace that I can't sue over. Right? So I walk past a coworker or walk into a meeting, and the meeting was supposed to start at 8:30, but everybody got there at 8:15, and they started meeting without me. I'm like, what is that? How come you guys didn't tell me you were? Oh, we just got together because we were already here and stuff. Okay, all right. Once, twice, I can let that slide. But when it becomes a pattern, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm being excluded from this gathering. Or people telling jokes. People telling jokes about groups of people, right? Telling Muslim jokes, right? That's the latest punching bag, right? So they're telling Muslim jokes. The fact that people are telling the jokes, I can't sue over, but it is a micro inequity.
And so I think what I equals to microaggressions.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so what I was interested in was what connection you're making to discretionary.
Yep. So discretionary effort basically says that I can do my job. My employer will prefer that I do my job at 100%. To keep my job, I can get away with 75%. Between 100 and 75 is at my discretion.
But how are you connected?
Microaggressions or micro inequities drive down discretionary effort.
Okay, that's and so you're suggesting that that's a mental model for us to be aware of as concerning
Correct. Thank you, Rachel, for bringing this straight to the point.
Sorry, I was just
around the way, right? Yeah. So micro inequities drive down discretionary effort. This is a mental model that you need to be mindful of, particularly when we talk about this idea of respect. Because microaggressions and micro inequities would be the sum total of microaggressions.
And then so then with diversity, it's not like you were taken to the former model was the idea that if you bring diversity and you're lowering people,
Yep.
and that you, but also treating that as other people that operate
Yep.
in a covert way.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And we need to be mindful of that, and we need to.
Yeah.
Right. So all these things that need to be deconstructed. Thank you for the clarity. So let's do this. I'm going to do an activity just to kind of mix it up a little bit. So you're either part of two organizations. One is a university, and the other one is a pharmaceutical company. All right, and you and the pharmaceutical company will be. We both are looking for this particular this fruit, both the mobile fruit, and we had some negotiations in the past. There's a limited quantity, but you're trying to purchase the remaining. You're trying to negotiate how the two of you will approach the farmer for the last mobile fruit. All right. There is some distrust between your organization, between the university and the pharmaceutical company, because you've undermined each other in the past. So, so there's some animosity between the two of you. I'm going to give you a card. It's going to have your role, and I don't want you to reveal what your particulars about your role, but know that you're both trying to negotiate with each other how you will approach the farmer for those terms. Right? Does that make sense? All right. And what will happen is that this side of the room will be negotiating with this side of the room. All right? So I'm going to pass out your roll cards. Actually, two of you could be at the same. I want you to read over the roll, your roll, and I'm going to give about 6 minutes for negotiation. And when you feel like you've reached a good point of negotiation, I just want you to raise your hand, and then that's when we'll stop. When people feel like they're able to negotiate something that's